hide the kings of ancient Egypt. AF. Road to the Valley of the Kings. The Valley of the Kings is a narrow closed valley located on the west land of the Nile, behind the rocks of Mount Luxor, which is geographically an deep groove surrounded by heights, resembles a large irregular hole that mediates the rim heights of the western plateau, and eastern faces the Crank temples about 3 kilometers away from it. The road leading to the Valley of the Kings from Luxor city, after crossing the Nile River, is a long road that penetrates the plain through the temple of Sidi I in the village of Kurna, then bends the west on a rocky, bent road that penetrates the hills, about 5 kilometers long. AF. Why did the pharaohs choose this valley? The story of this valley's choice of a place to bury kings deserves to be told. The first Thutmose, 1540 to 1501 BC, the third pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, wanted to choose his grave in a solitary valley behind good rocks in order to preserve his body and maintain him from being extended by the thieves. And I did not fail to mention this task, which was entrusted to him by his king, in the texts which he wrote down on his tomb. I alone oversaw the choice of the rock cemetery of His Majesty King Thutmose I, without anyone seeing or hearing me. AF. Where did Egyptians bury their bodies? The ancient Egyptians believed in immortality. Their means of achieving this was to take care of their dead and set up burial places, strained themselves in their choice, and spared no effort in bringing huge coffins from far away. From time immemorial, until the pre-family era, ancient Egyptians chose their tombs on the edge of the desert away from the valley's agricultural land, which is flooded annually, or on the rocky hillsides to be out of reach of thieves and messengers, as well as away from natural courtyard factors such as humidity that decompose and technicalize bodies. AF. Burial. In the time of the pharaohs. As the pharaohs began to rule, the burial method itself continued, with little change, with burials in the sandy edge or at the foot of mountainous places, but after a somewhat inflated size of the cemetery, it became between 7 and 5 meters wide, and the hole became 3 meters deep. They also added building the sides of the crater with milk bricks, then covered with wood beams, also supported by other beams of wood, and did so to avoid sand collapse. The kings were different from the graves of individuals only in large size, building the crater floor with yogurt bricks, erecting a staircase between the cemetery floor and the floor deck, spreading side rooms as storage stores for food, funeral furniture, decorative tools, hunting and combat weapons, and eventually placing a plaque bearing the name of the king buried in it. AF. The cemetery. Idea, philosophy and image. The cemetery in the ancient Egyptians was a microcosm of the other world, whether it was drilled in the sand or built with bricks, milk or stones or carved in the deaf rock. The aim of its preparation was to achieve a religious idea, namely that the deceased undertook his funeral journey with the soul a idol in the compound that delivers it to the other world. As a result, the cemetery was closed tightly and never opened after the corpse had been bribed and the burial ceremony had been completed, and so the cemetery's entrance to the cemetery had been completely hidden. For the same reason, it painted on the walls of the cemetery, starting with its entrance, its marbles, its hallucinations and the burial hall, drawings and inscriptions relating to the other world and all its parts and inhabitants. AF. Route to the burials of kings. After the embalming ceremony, the mummy moved to the cemetery in a solemn ceremony, and the walls of the royal cemeteries received drawings detailing the funeral parade. The procession begins with a team of relatives and servants of the deceased king carrying flowers, good pots and aromatic oils, followed by a team of high priests and clergy carrying vials of holy water, and then the coffin comes around which the clergymen wrap while carrying steamy, perfume pots and goodness. He walks behind the king's coffin, the queen and the rest of his wives and daughters, and his female relatives and acquaintances. They have been blindfolded, smeared their faces in blue nile or clay, ripped off their clothes, and without a moment stopping to blow the cheeks and beat the chest, while some professional women often lay down dead scoops and well-being. Finally, they carry the coffin over their shoulders and enter it with the cemetery door, then gently move it to slide down the landing lane, whose floor is sprayed with holy water and soft sand. The king's funeral furniture is then deposited in the cemetery alongside his weapons, and all the ornaments and clothing he needs in the other world, which are hastily arranged by a team of priests inside the cemetery. AF. The queen may be the last to leave the cemetery, after laying a bouquet of flowers to say goodbye to the king, and ultimately, workers close the grave door and hide it, using pottery tools that they break after finishing their work, and hide it in a hole close to the burial place, often preaching to archaeologists'